Well, I thought the best place to start was really kind of where we began our kind of interest with it. How do we the process of getting developing an app in a decentralized manner without any coding skills. So first of all, maybe give an overview of the two projects you sent me today, and we can take it from there.
Yeah. Basically, what I did was what decentralization was. You know, promoting just basic projects around town, and like promote, you know, with gardening and self-interest training and stuff, and you know, decentralized education and whatnot, and this is building things for like the whole, you know, mentorship idea I showed you there, and it's for individuals to do things themselves and grow things themselves and learn things themselves, you know. So just the core abilities for people just do things themselves. And what do you want to do on a basic level? You want to make produce it. You have to feed yourself and you know get knowledge. You know, so basic level. You know, I think you have funds to buy supplies and stuff. You know how land and stuff. You know, so things that cost and the amount of waste you actually get out of it. Just as a cover of other people, you know, to talk to people and yeah, so more or less, you know, it problem solve and you know, talk to people and whatnot, you know. Just basically make a list of what you need and you go get it, you know. A whole bunch of institutions to do that, you know. I think that's you know, you need government, you need this, you need that, you need these corporations and institutions. No, you just need to talk to people and so that's more or less what those, you know, articles I sent you are about, just breaking down the costs and whatnot.
The way I approach this, and I think creating any tool, whether it's a piece of artwork, which is something we both got experience in, or whether it's a piece of music, or whether it's, and I think this is where you can start this whole fundamental, you know, where do people start this process? I think the first thing to do is come up with an idea. People say, oh, that's illegal. It's not. It's a hard thing to have an idea. When you have an idea, my first piece of advice is someone who, as you know, maybe for people listening will know that I have got no coding experience. My first piece of advice is, especially relating to apps or to have any idea about anything in a decentralized platform, it's exactly what you just spoken upon. But the very first thing you should do is put it down on paper, draw it, write it, and at least have it in your head, something that's gone from your mind onto a piece of paper. Maybe your form of doing it is in, you know, onto a script, onto a laptop, but get it out and put it onto something. That's my very first step, I would say, because I think once you've got it onto an idea, onto a piece of paper or onto something solid, then you can ask all the questions that every person who's going to build anything should ask: is the hows, the wheres, the whats, and the most important question when you get to this point is the why. Because I think this, to me, this is the most fundamental question to start with. Is the hows, the wheres, all that. They come next. It's why. Why are you doing this? Why would you want to spend your energy and your time doing that? If you find the why, that basis onwards, then I think the rest is going to be a step-by-step process that you've got a fundamental foundation at the beginning, and I think that's where I've always looked at things. So that's my two perspectives at the very early stage. I'll hear your thoughts.
Watched a video on the major businesses, and the businesses that succeed are the businesses that start with why rather than how or what. You know, like take Apple for example. template for how. They don't get the template how or what. You know, they don't just other template. But if you tell us how or what or what, they say, oh well, it's well, other build computers. Well, nobody cares if you build computers. Everyone builds computers. But if you think about, you say, well, I care about freedom, so I build best computers. Or I care about being different, so I build Mac computers. Or I care about, business, so I build, Windows computers. You know, and people care about these things. They keep it focused, and that's what gets people up off the ground. So, I have to make sure that the companies do that, Some people, if you want to have a decentralization project or an app or whatever, you get them, you say, well, how is my app different? Why am I building this app? And decentralized organization app, application or whatever, then we really need the why. Why would people crowdfund this? Why would people care about this, organization? Why would people, want to use this app? So that's how you should evolve. Or if you're trying to build even just in person, like an non-profit organization or something. Why do people care about getting up, and volunteering? Why do people care about, donating funds to this or time or whatever, So that's what motivates people, Gets people up and out the door and, gets people meetings and whatnot. It's why, it's the joint belief and cause, But then you have to figure out, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to get, how are you going to get this done, and solve the, little bits and pieces and whatnot. And then you have to actually say, well, what am I doing, So it's kind of like, most people say, well, what am I doing, how am I doing, and then why? Bring people first. Go to the why, how, what,
Yeah, hence the reason I say that from this creative process about trying to build an app from a non-coding perspective. As I said, I think putting it down on paper was really helpful for me. And I'm an artist, so that is my kind of natural form of how I put things into creation. I found it a very useful process of doing that. But then comes the next big question, and it's something I faced, and it's something that I know many people are going to face, and I want more people to face it, because to me, fundamentally, for a paradigm shift to happen, this has got to escape from the echo chambers of a few coders or a few people who are, getting excited about freedom or Bitcoin, and we've got to expand this into where everybody can use this. And then you come to the question, and the difficult first term is, okay, so I have an idea, I've answered the why, I can sort of see why, how I can, what my product or my app or whatever I'm trying to offer a solution, how that may, what it's going to feel. The next thing you've got to do is, how do we code it? Now, this is a question that I have to think real upon, because along with the two having this with N99, trust me, you do come across a lot of people who think they know a lot more than they do. There's a lot of people who can understand that and are quite rightly in the free market we live in, charge a lot of money for that. But what you start to realize is there's very few people in the world who understand the coding language as it stands right now, C++, Rust. These are very kind of high level skills, and the people who have those skills and knowledge, they kind of know where they are in the world. So you've got to offer them a product. And this is where you go the first two hurdles that happen on this is, okay, so you have to learn the coding yourself. Now, to be real and honest with you, my reception now has been, if I took myself back to 2.5 years ago, I would have learned some code. I didn't because I thought, I had many other things to do, and maybe I thought this will all happen quicker than it does. But that's the lesson to learn, that things get process. So I think the thing to do immediately is, if you can, delve as much as you can into some sort of computer language. If you can't, the next one, and this is your products, anything you do is about that networking and reaching out. And you've got to reach out with an open mind, but you've got to reach out with a mind that's aware of how people are, because human nature doesn't just change because you go into an echo chamber where it's full of decentralized people. Human nature is human nature, and you have to be like a warrior. You have to be, aware of the situation. So, step into it. But the coding one, that is a great, at the moment, I think is a great gap that needs to be bridged, because I think there's people with ideas, but the lack of code is difficult. I think maybe as more and more people learn, this is going to become more and more simple. But I think right now, I think you just got to reach out and network. And I'm going to list sites when we put this out, but there's many of them, upwork.com. You can go and find people. There are options, but that's my two reflections. So I've spoken to you, my perspective. What are your thoughts?
Well, I got two thoughts here. That's stupid. So you have to, what do programming languages actually do? They break people on how to do something. So, and what do programming words actually do? They break down what you say you want to do into actual individual. So you as a human being don't words like actually break down the very section as pieces of logic. So you need to actually know programming language in order to do this. What are the steps you want the computer to do in order to these instructions? So smaller these and more precise these steps in instructions, steps to make this. Small steps to make this into, and smaller bite-sized pieces to make this. To actually tell, and they might, adjustments later on. More perspective to your instructions, the easier the programming will be later on, Like one of the things you need to do as a human being, and as a, app designer, so to speak, is to break down your idea into very, very specific instructions, and as you're doing that, you can say, oh, well, I can do this, and I can do that, and I'll add this, and I'll take out this step because this doesn't here instead, like you can revise as you go, and you'll get in front of people and you'll get new ideas. So you can actually write the program yourself using logic. You won't add, it's not all about programming language, it's mostly about logic. You have to, you don't just learn about, a lot of the programming languages, the same groups, the same, if-else statements, the same mechanics, so to speak. So if you can learn those mechanics, you learn about loops, learn about, false, stuff like that, then you can program. You just need to sort of think like a computer, more or less. And I don't know how to program in Java, but I know the basics of how, I know basic loops. I don't know how to program in Rust, but I know some of the functions Rust would use, like loops and whatnot. I don't know how to program in JavaScript. But the difference between Java you know, and C++ are, it's basically just grammar. That's basically all it is. But the core functions are more or less the same. They always use loops. They always use the same, you know, if-else statements. They all use the, you know, they all break things down in the same, more or less the same statements. So if you can think like that, you can more or less, you know, solve the same problems. Now, about networking, you know, it's like, I guess my next question is, how do you network? How do you find the people you want to find? You know? And, like, where do you find them? How do you find them? How do you convince them to get on board with your project? That kind of thing. You know? And, you know, how do you crowdfund successfully? That kind of thing. You know? Like I saw you of finding a, you know, or just having an idea, and so many people, and then so many people were funding you for $12,000, you know? So how do you do that, more or less? You know? And then how do you find programmers to actually, you know, code your software? You know? So, but obviously, yes, network. You know, talk to people first. How do you find people to find?
Now, the first step upon that journey is, and again, I always relate this down to any creative process, because I think the same process with anything creative, but particularly this one, I'll answer you directly. It's a case of just putting your head above the parapet and actually, for instance, that's why we're having this conversation. I've been doing this, you know, this podcast now for, you know, 2 years plus, you know, and it's a case of putting your head out there and networking. And this is where the dilemma comes for not many people who are creative, because creative people tend to be outsiders, therefore they don't like to go and network, and you find many creative people, or the people who are coders or anything, they tend to be, it's like the hashtag I always use, herding cats. It's very difficult to get people together. So I think the first thing to do, my advice has been, you know, from my experience, is you've got to put your head above the parapet. Tell people, it's like anything else. If you have an idea and you've gone through the whole process of understanding your own mind, why it's good, and you feel confident that, then and tell people, because that's how, you know, you can't expect anyone else to just mind read what you're going to do. You have to go out there and tell people that out. And for instance, you mentioned, you know, it goes back to what I said before. So all that on, you know, drew it all out, and then bit by bit wrote the white paper, and then it's a case of putting the site up and taking all the steps of just introducing yourself to people. And I think sort of take it a step back, which I think is crucial, because I think once you've got an idea and you kind of thought of enough idea, I think one of the pieces of advice I give before you do any of what we discussed in this previous section I was just talking about, is to basically look at the idea and go, right, in what could be the worst case scenario? What if in 6 months' time we're sitting there, it's gone completely the worst case scenario? What is going to be the thing that everybody's going to say to us why it went wrong, and what could we have learned where we went wrong in the first place? If you do that from the very beginning, then you feel kind of really confident. Like for instance, in 99, I'm very confident telling everyone what it is. I said all along, this is the pure functionality of it all. You said, you know, we talk about, you know, even the crowd sale, people got, you know, rewarded and resourced that, you know, the making of that, because of the time it was put out of, you know, like I said, putting, you know, explaining what the product was, doing the hard work. You know, it's hard work of putting the hours in, connecting people, networking people, talking to people. It's like life itself. But you'll find that if people have an idea, like we discussed right back to the beginning of this conversation, if your idea is an idea that's, if it's all the criteria, it definitely fits that why process, and it's doable, then you'll start to see that other people will see that. That's like if I'm drawing a sketch. You know, as I look at it, I may draw a sketch and I put it out and go, oh, do you know what? I can see that painting, how that's going to turn out. And then you turn out a painting. Now, it may not be exactly how they imagined in their head, but it's based on sketch. And if people see the rough idea and they know what it is, that's, it still comes to this question. I've spoken to many coders about that, and I said before, it's just, you'll come across the same old human nature. People are people, that's why deliberately I call this the podcast, because people are people, and sometimes I think people put coders on pedestals, or they put them down in the pits, and they're not, they're just human beings, and they have very individual needs, and very, as they are, and you'll find a lot of them, just like anyone else, have the characteristics and traits anyone do. They're not anything other than just human beings. So it comes down to, this is the step we're talking about. You've got to come out, you've got to convict, know your own head of what you're talking about is clear. If you can get that in a clear, concise way as you were speaking upon, has the skills of a computer like a tutor, then that person will intrinsically come along. It's like when you do anything. That's the jump into the void. That's the moment I speak upon when I say, we're like nothing more than just the stick. That in essence is all we're doing. That is the essence of being an entrepreneur. It's the essence of being an outsider. It's the essence of being a creative person. You do have to jump into the void with an idea. And maybe no one will come to your help. Maybe someone will. But the thing I've learned, and the lesson I maybe want to sort of convey to people is, even at times when you have the ups and downs, and there will be ups and there will be downs, and colours will come, people will get excited and they won't get excited, and you'll have all the ups and downs. It's just, it goes back to when you started with your idea and why you knew it worked. And also, all the time, just keep on, don't ever stop, because I've seen, not in relation to even just building apps, just so many creative projects, just people just give up on them and they just turn away because of a few difficulties, or which is really key to all this. Especially building apps, especially doing computer language, as much as it's all very logical. Things, particularly in the tech world, they change so quickly. I really thought this is, you spoke about Eric when you were talking about your self-education. It was the idea of talking and collaboration. That, like I say, no self-appointed leader or group of people should ever divert you from an idea. If you come from your own head, you know that it works, then follow it. Don't ever give up on it. You just keep going. And I think, to really answer on practical terms, there are many sites you can reach out to people that are up, like I said before, I'll list them in as places like Upwork. You can reach out to people on the SafeNet forum. There's many forums you can reach out to, many great platforms, there's many people out there. But it comes down to your own head, and you've got to manage how much time you want to spend in jumping down how many rabbit holes that many people. So I think it always comes down to the fundamental one of it. As long as you're securing your idea at the beginning and you'll go with that point, then when people come or when they don't come, it'll happen. And my experiences, they do happen. And if you do take those steps and you carry on with that mentality of keeping it simple, keeping it logical, trusting your mindset and your thought process. I always say step by step, because the great thing is you're not the only one in the world who's doing this. That's one thing I always try to reach out to people doing anything, especially in we're kind of in the vapor world, and beyond even the early adopters. Is that there are many people out there. There are as many people out there with the same idea and pushing for the same ideals. But really, give you a collective helping hand and give you their wisdom, and that's what I'm saying. For instance, anyone wants to reach out to this conversation, I'll point them away. Listen to things like the podcasts that are out there. There's many people you can reach out. Most of the people I've known in this whole world, in general, as much as people are people, they're very open to collaboration and sharing, and equally, which is fundamental, they're open to ideas being right and wrong, because we're all based generally on the idea that paradigm to really work is based on the idea that ideas can be expressed in a way that people aren't going to get upset about it and kick off about it. And like you said before, you were speaking on the idea that learning is about rights and wrongs and people doing their own ideas, because it's all part of this. There's no one right way. So we don't need answers. So I hope I've given you some clarity.
So I guess what people are afraid of is not having funds or not having, or not broke, investing too much, and having the whole people fall through. But that goes back to what you're talking about. What's happened? Well, what's happened is the business or whatever failed, But you got to plan for that, So don't overinvest.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to allude to when I was saying that we have got, before you jump into anything else, try to take the worst case scenario and think, okay, can I survive the situation where I'm broken? Don't look anything else. I don't think anybody would say to anybody that, and I'm for certain one, I would never say to anybody, don't take what my word for it or anything else. I would never say to anybody, risk all your income and your child, your child education, your mortgage or whatever it may be on the same for idea. I think wisely, and because the great thing I think one of the great things about doing it in the paradigm that we're speaking about in decentralization is you don't need a lot of resources, and you don't need to step up too much outside your circle or an echo chamber to find people who are willing to either point you on the next direction or help you that little bit and subdivide the work and just as it does. And I think it lives around what you always basics come down to is the people. You just got to find people who you just like you said, who you feel you can work along with and trust. It's I always use the analogy of a band. When a band starts off, and I just took a very general terms, but it's usually like 3 or 4, lads who are like, they've all got around, they like the sound they're making, and they've got a dream when they're 15, 16, or one day, playing at some big venue and hopefully just, having the time of their lives. And as I go along that process, and I've seen so many bands, you see them like the 10,000, and they've got like 12-piece orchestra and 6 dancers, and it's like ballooned completely from what the core is, and the whole thing has become diluted. And I think one of what I'm trying to allude to is when you are building anything, especially when you're doing something, just keep it as you would think it like you would as a band. If you're comfortable in being in a band that's got 12 members, then great, then keep your numbers to that. But if you're intrinsically one of those people, which tends to be a lot of outsiders who are the creative people who are generally going to be building the app, particularly those who don't come, we tend to be like big circles. So as with anything, don't be your gut and trust and find people that you can work with. Because ultimately it always breaks down to people, because there's always that 6 degree of separation of someone who will know how to learn the language or know somebody who knows somebody who learns that. That will always be intrinsically true, but I think it's always about people, and that's what I think was one of the most important things to remember, because I think I've seen so many projects, generally in the whole decentralized world, and they become two ways. They become overloaded, massive, ridiculous. Everybody jumping in and everybody's thinking they've got an opinion. And they've got this whole mob mentality, world stuff. Or you get other ones that just die off, and because nobody just pays any attention, and the person gives up. And I think this is like anything else. It's so different, as I said, to making an album, or if you're an artist making a piece of art, or if you're an author. You just got to plough through it. You've got to sometimes just put your head down, plough through it, and reach out. And there are good sites to reach out to, but as I said before, when you do reach out, just get to know the person beforehand. Get to know them, think of them, as you said. Don't jump your life savings into jumping into a bet like you can jump into Las Vegas and bet all your life savings into a bet. Don't let someone open up all your ideas and your intimate ideas about how you may have your app with somebody that you only just know for 2 minutes. I mean, you wouldn't trust someone in your house who would be like that. So just be aware, because, and I speak upon this because it's easy to get caught away with, when you have got a vision, like you've got your two ideas, or I don't really know. It's very, many creative people like this, we see the vision and we expect everybody to understand it, and we think, it can all be done so simply, and before you know it, you almost get tormented by your vision because you just get frustrated by how everybody else plays it, which is always, like you said before, it's like keeping it simple, keeping it real, and keeping the people who you're going to really tell us about, keep to them so that as it would be real life. Don't treat people on the outside world because they're not connected and you don't see them face to face. Treat them like you would do your friends. And I think that's really important, because there is a lot of, it has to be true. This is a truthful statement. There's a lot of snakes out there. You know what I mean? It's not some hippy-dippy commune out there in the decentralized world where, no, there's people out there who are just looking to suck up ideas and destroy ideas and plow it full of whatever selfish needs they may have to, so I think it's really important to say to people, be aware, because people, particularly creative people, you can be very open and trusting, and there's, this decentralized world is just like any part of life itself. There's a lot of people out there who are willing to take as much leverage out of that trust of us creative people as possible.
I want to learn how to do is depend on other parts of centralization, like what we're promote the local, self-directed learning would be a decentralized, digital database or something like that, so that people could just log on to the computer and access any amount of knowledge they wanted, or download, textbooks or something for free, or whatever, or access a, federated scientific database or something, or scientific, medical, or whatever, and have it all decentralized and, cross-referenced, and peer-reviewed or whatever, and have anyone who wants to research anything, if it doesn't switch your data to the network, and other people can, check the data, perform their experiments themselves or whatever, and say this is good, or we made a mistake here, or whatever, and then, forget, and peer review it, or, try to, create eventually based on it, or whatever, So my point is that in real life, like out here in big space, can be enhanced by having a digital ecosystem on a state network or whatever. And what frustrates me is I can see the potential for this. I can see what's happening, what this could mean for real life people, but the apps have not been written yet. So part of me wants to write these apps, and part of me wants to promote the real life communities so that they will be ready for the apps. And it's like part of it's like a hurry up and wait system, and part of it's, just hurry up and get it done, you know? And the rest of the world is going, but it can be done. Well, yes, it can be done. We just have to do it. You know what I'm saying here?
I completely concur with you, my friend. I mean, I think I probably know more than a lot of people it's like to that end. I mean, I've like I said, approached this from day one being told, almost like an army of ants or creative people behind me who just been demanding kind of like the products that on decentralization for 15, 20 years, for a long time. So yeah, the demand's there, and that's what I'm saying. I don't think I'd ever have a shortage of people come to me, and a closed door to go and sell this, to tell people, oh, there's going to be something that's going to come along and do stuff. They think it's the greatest thing in the world, but we keep going back to what it is. And I think this is again, and I really want to make this conversation real and truthful, because I think one of the things we must always avoid is these echo chambers where we just sit and listen to our own self opinions and patting ourselves on the back or being too harsh on ourselves. We have to be very insightful and honest with ourselves. But one of the things that we have to realise is that there aren't many people, as I said before, the coders aren't out there. I mean, I wish I could sort of report back and say, oh, there's the coders. There's not. I mean, they're not out there, these people, and I think it's one of the things that I always give the call out to people and find those people who are going to learn to do this. And I'm saying it is frustrating, and this is where we get into this whole, it's almost like a circular spiral, because you get into, yes, we all want this to happen, but we know if we rush it out, this could do it. Do you understand? And it's kind of like, sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I also want to interject here and say, well, of course, there are people who think logically and think down the coders to make it easy for them, and also, one can learn the easy programming languages like JavaScript or HTML, and one can teach. Once one does understand these things, one can teach that to other people. So I think there needs to be a sort of process where one is learning these easier languages and teaching it to people who don't know them. And so from there, you can learn more advanced programming languages. So there's a process of learning these languages slowly and then teaching them. Because teaching does help you learn the language, more thoroughly. So even if you can't learn, say, C++, if you've done HTML or JavaScript, you can do a whole lot with that, And once you learn that, you can, maybe even if you can't understand, say, jQuery or something, if you can learn JavaScript and HTML, then you can go whole of that, teach that to other people who don't know HTML and JavaScript, and are totally bamboozled by how a web page works. So from there, you might say, well, I'm going to try to learn jQuery or those other, or make some node or whatnot, And from there, you'll start exploring a bit more, And then, well, there, if you know web pages, you'll be, learning a bit more, and then you'll, start programming. Then you'll be a programmer, More advanced stuff, And it's like a process. It's again a language. It's like learning how, going from basic math to algebra to calculus or whatever else to advanced physics or whatnot. So, but you don't do it overnight. You learn how to do count and do basic math first. You don't look at someone doing physics and then doing engineering stuff and think, wow, who just did that? basic, doing basic maths and, how to build a birdhouse first before you start working on, a car or, how to use a bandsaw, Because you go straight to a bandsaw, you don't cut your fingers off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do the basics first. But you can learn to do these things, and you can learn to teach these things. So we have to stop thinking, this is impossible to learn. No, it's not. You have to get in there, It's like learning how to speak English, just learn how to do anything. It's like any other language, just learn how to draw.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just going to appreciate that. You didn't just say, I can. You have incredible art skills. Did you just acquire them? No. You practiced and practiced and practiced and learned and experimented and did, all kinds of different things to get those art skills. And could you teach them? Probably. So, it's the same thing. It's the same process of learning something and then teaching it. It's like anything of a skill. Programmers will exist in coding as a language. But again, it's like, I guess what I'm going with this is we need to start thinking about breaking these things down, and breaking our ideas down so that others can just easily pick it up and say, okay, you did a couple whoops here, and, program this, program that, and there we go, But yeah, it's academics like anything else. Okay, I'm get what I'm saying?
No, I think this is a call maybe to everybody. I think. This is a call I put out, and I think you probably can tell what you're just saying there. I think this is something that I say that everybody can have a role in this, and I think people, for instance, I think it's actually essential we have people out there making these lessons out there and giving it to them. For example, like you said, but you perfectly know, I couldn't say it better word for word than you said. For instance, I'm an artist. I didn't wake up one morning and learn how to do my paintings because that was a long, hard process. But the great thing is, so if I sit there now and go, oh, well, and someone comes to me and says, oh, how do I paint? I have to tell them, yes, it's going to take a long process. But if I just turn to them and say, well, you'll get it, you'll be like, no, you've got to teach them that they don't understand some of the basics and some of the things because you're so involved in something. It's one of the things that I find talking to a lot of coders. You go down these rabbit holes and they kind of, you think, not everybody understands that. Not everybody understands the basic simples. People don't understand decentralization. They don't understand, let alone when you talk about Rust and, certain blockchains and so the average person out there, as I said before, talk to you, imagine you're trying to explain this to your gran, she's not going to understand that. She wants something easy. And that's what I think people can do. That's why I think my call has always been, I would sit and listen to a podcast and someone teaching me how to, just like you say, learning the language of how to do the coding, just as I would be using the analogy as an artist. So I go out and go, okay, look, this is what you need to do. You just go out and sketch this, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do it. If that was all there, just a step by step, it would be a great learning tool. But the thing is, at the moment, there's not that many learning tools out there. There's not that many, and I think, and the ones that are out there, it's like anything else. You have to, the more people that are giving learning tools out there, the better it is. Because if it's just 10 people, it's like being at school, and it's like, teachers, and all you need is one teacher who teaches exactly the same, subject matter, but he does it in a creative way. That's the one teacher that everyone goes, oh, I remember him, or I remember that female teacher, I remember her, and that's what's needed and required. We need people from all walks of life just to basically express their knowledge, have conversations like this. And I think that's important. That is what we go back to what we were saying. Networking is. Now, half the networking is going out there. Important thing, the first important thing to say, and always remember is, no, always question everything. Always question, and never stop questioning, because they know the one answer, or they know the one route, or they know the one solution. But don't believe any of that, because they don't know. None of us know. And that's the point. The more you, and I can only speak from experience of just going down the rabbit hole of decentralization and technology for like 2.5 years. But nobody knows one way. There's no one way. It is literally like itself. It's a chaotic experience, and it's what we do as human beings in this process that is the inspiring element of it. So I just think it's my call out, and has been from day one. I think people can, put simple tools out there, however they feel they may not be about doing podcasts. Put it out there. We've got the tools. You've got the tools to put a 5-minute little conversation and say, this is the basics of Rust, or this is the basic of Java. As you said, give us the basics, the ABCs. Instead of just chucking us into Shakespeare, go A, B, C, D, E, F. And let's those simple tools, which I think, like the coding world, they think everybody knows this stuff. Like, oh, who doesn't know Java? And so, well, who does know Java? There's a very small sector, and it needs to be becoming more open. And that's going to happen when YouTube's a perfect example. I mean, back in the day, to learn a musical instrument, you have to go to some stuffy musical teacher or some dodgy, guy who's in a band. And now you can just stick on YouTube, and there's countless people, and they teach you any chord structure, how to play any style, and that's great. That's what we need for code. We need that open market, but that falls on their shoulders. They need to put that, as much as it falls on the shoulders of coders to build it, or it falls on the shoulders of people like me to build things, or we've all got responsibilities.
Here's a thought, man. It's also not going to preach. You need to that you're working both ways. You need, yes, you can also, anyone can learn anything they want, but also anything they want. And everyone should teach as much as they can learn, because teaching is learning. You can't learn without everyone also teaching. So, but there's this idea that, oh well, I can't teach because I don't have a certificate. Yes, you can teach. If you have knowledge, you can teach. And as you teach, you will learn, because in order to teach, you need to break down this idea so that your student can understand you, very thoroughly understand the concept. If you cannot teach it, you do not understand it yourself. Therefore, in order to teach something, you have to understand the concept, and understand it simply enough that you explain it to someone who doesn't understand it. So, like I was explaining, that if you can't explain something simply, you do not understand it. Like, if you can't explain it to someone in grade 7 or whatever it was, you don't understand the concept. So, like that's, I'm not sure if that's exact great, but you have to really understand an idea simply in order to, so that you get it. If you don't get it, you have to go back and exercise yourself. I've had this experience myself, because I teach a lot of that be StarCraft, or teaching them how to use the computer, or whatever. I teach a lot of people who don't understand tech and gaming and stuff. And so I've had this experience where I have to go back and relearn the stuff so I can teach it to someone else who doesn't understand it very well. And I've had to go, I've understood something intuitively, but I haven't understood it concretely in order to explain to someone else. Understand something concretely and thoroughly in order to explain to someone else. And in the process of teaching, you then more thoroughly understand it to the point where you have to sort of, there's a point where you just all you can learn, but in order to learn more, you have to start teaching. So I believe that this is something everyone has to do. This is something universal. This is not something not enough people do, because they're all stuck up on their afraid to teach because they don't have this certification, or they're too proud to teach because they have the certification. You know? And the more we just decentralize, the more we'll get, start just teaching and learning because we can, and we should, and because we have the knowledge, and we're not carrying a piece of paper that says you have permission or credibility to teach. If we don't have the knowledge and we produce bad lessons, people will not pay attention to us. If we do have the knowledge and produce good lessons, people will pay attention to us. I think that should be the quality, not whether or not some institution says or you were a good student or you were X reputable. People value what you are putting out there in your work, merit-based, not, and the quality of your work, not whether some authority says you are good enough. Anyway, man, I've been talking to you for like 50 3 minutes and going on an hour or so. I think we're gonna wrap this up.
That's cool, man. I was just going to say to you before we do wrap this up, there's a couple of things. One, where can people reach out to you if they do want to speak to you and reach out and inspire by tonight's conversation?
Same platform there. I guess you could Skype there, which is I've got mail, .com. Yeah, so yeah. but yeah, yeah, you can contact on the formula. Yeah, so it's not much difficult.
Just do wrap this up. Maybe in one sort of paragraph, maybe what would be your overriding message for anyone to sort of wrap this whole conversation up in one paragraph?
Start from the bottom up to the top. We don't need a middleman. We don't need institutions. We don't need government. We don't need all these big corporations. We just need to talk to one another. That's what decentralization and freedom is about. Connections with end. Which really is talking to people. They communicate with the end. Anonymous communication. And, that kind of thing. Self-directed education, information, all that kind of thing. Food. For God's sakes, grow your own food. Produce your own stuff. Learn things yourselves. Grow your own food. Trade with one another. That kind of thing. Use a middleman. You don't need it. You don't need government. You don't need someone giving you permission to do things. Do it yourself. Learn it yourself. produce it yourself. That's more or less what I'm trying to get out there. Produce it yourself, grow it yourself, do it yourself. You know, that kind of thing.
Well, perfect, mate.
You know?
Well, perfect.
Yeah.
We've nearly hit that hour mark. So, well, thank you very much for your time for that, my friend. It's been a really insightful conversation. From me all over here in Scotland to all over in Canada, I want to say life is people, people.